Hey guys, it's Jules. Awkward, but it's gonna be fine. Chris is usually my buffer. Um, but I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit more about PTSD and my experience with it. Um, I looked up the definition before starting this video, and when you just type in PTSD definition into Google, it talks about, being in the military and flashbacks. And when I looked up the psychology definition of PTSD, it had many more definitions of it. And I wouldn't say that my PTSD is Jax. Thank you. Cat. Um, I wouldn't say that my definition is where I get flashbacks, but I experience it's like a trigger anytime somebody raises their voice at me, or anytime someone's tone of voice changes, and it just clicks in my head, and I just get thrown back into these feelings of guilt and shame, and they overtake my being. Sometimes I've had them last up to 2 months. I've not even realized it. It's like I'm really good at having this persona up front, but inside I'm very, very fragile and confused and not sure who I am. It's like I have lost every ounce of trust in the person I've been building. I quite honestly lose myself. And the incredible thing about finding yourself after going through a PTSD trigger is how many times you fought to get back to you. I had an event happen earlier this year, and man, I went down a rabbit hole. And it was the first time, whenever it happened, somebody raised their voice at me, and the first 3 days were god awful. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to talk to anybody. Like, how do you talk to somebody whenever you can't even explain what you're going through? You can't pinpoint it. There's no book telling you what your brain's going through or what you're going about. Well, there are books out there that tell you what your brain's going through, but not your own personal book. We each develop those on our own. And that's kind of the manual that I'm building right now, is how to me. But when I was triggered the first 3 days, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't find my way out of it. I had known I was triggered, but how do you stop it? And then that third day kicked in, and I was like, okay, it's time. You got to face what's going on inside of you right now. So I took an evening to myself, and I sat there in my thoughts, and I'm like, okay, how do you feel? And then I just walked myself through it. And the next day was a little bit easier. And I was like, okay, we're getting a handle on this. Like, starting to figure out how to maneuver this. And by the 5th day, I could breathe again. And that was the first time that I had talked to myself through an episode. And I went to my therapist and I told her about it. I'm like, oh my God, like, this is what happened. And holy shoot, I talked to myself through it. And the next 2 to 3 times I went back to therapy, I go every other week, were much easier. And this is just my journey with it. But after that experience with it, as I talked about in one of the earlier videos, it's like I changed one of my core memories. And that's what my therapist was talking about. My PTSD stemmed from a childhood trauma. I can't tell you where it came from. There are too many experiences that probably led up to what I went through, or what I go through with PTSD. But she said that it's like I did change that childhood part in my brain, and I have now replaced it with an adult experience. Because when you're a kid and you're going through all this stuff, if you have a background where you've experienced trauma, you're a kid, you're kind of helpless. You rely on your parents. You don't really have your own voice. You can't really make your own decisions yet. Hopefully you're learning, but in all of it, you don't really have control of your situation. And then you're let out into the world as an adult, and you're left with those things from your childhood that are still your main focus in the world, how you deal with things. So I was able to change one of my core memories, and now anytime I'm triggered from my own personal triggers, I'm able to flip back to what I went through earlier this year and help myself, like guide myself through it. And I have been triggered since then. And I notice it whenever I start shaming myself. Guilt and shame, I know I've spoken about those, but guilt I feel is a little bit healthier than shame. But a lot of times throughout specifically my childhood, I was shamed for whatever mistake I made. So in my head, excuse my language, I'm telling myself, you're a piece of shit. Like, why'd you do that? Why didn't you know better? And really, I'm human, and it's okay that I didn't do better, because I'm learning. So I feel like guilt is a little bit healthier because you can sit there and say, yeah, I do feel guilty about that. And you can keep that emotion in mind. But it's not like you keep that emotion in mind and you're like, okay, I don't want to feel that way again. I've learned from this thing. Now I can move on. But a lot of my PTSD is shaming myself. So it's really nice to be where I'm at right now and who I am right now, because I'm learning not to shame myself for being human, and that's a beautiful thing. Being human is a beautiful thing. And the more you work on yourself and figure out your triggers, figure out your self-awareness, it does get easier. But yeah, I just wanted to share with you guys a little bit about my journey with PTSD. So much love to you, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to message. Bye.